In every great dynasty, there are legends whose names echo through time. Bradshaw, Mean Joe Greene, Jack Lambert, Mel Blount. Their stories are told again and again. But there was one man, a leader, a mentor, a captain, whose name slowly faded from history, despite being there before all of them. His name wasn't loud, his style wasn't flashy, and he didn't chase attention. But when the Steelers were broken, losing, and searching for identity, he was the one holding the team together. He wasn't just a player. He was the first real captain of the Pittsburgh Steelers. A man who served his country, returned from the army, and helped shape the Steel Curtain with discipline, intelligence, and quiet leadership. A man who guided Greene, Lambert, Ham, and Blount before they became legends. A man with 7 Pro Bowls, 2 Super Bowls, and the respect of every teammate he ever played with. Welcome to Black and Gold Legacy, where we honor the triumphs, heartbreaks, and forgotten heroes who built the Pittsburgh Steelers empire. If you love stories of grit, glory, and greatness, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Because today, we're bringing you the untold story of Andy Russell, the original leader of the Steelers dynasty. Early life, discipline before football. Andy Russell wasn't born into football greatness. He didn't come from a football powerhouse state like Texas or Pennsylvania. He grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, in a middle-class family that valued discipline, responsibility, and work ethic more than anything else. His father, an engineer, believed in structure and character. His mother believed in humility, education, and integrity. From a young age, Andy learned that success was not given, it was earned. He wasn't the biggest kid in school. He wasn't the fastest. He wasn't the strongest. But there was something different about him, his mindset. Andy had discipline before he ever had football skills. He was the kind of kid who woke up early, finished his work, helped at home, and never complained. He had a quiet confidence, the kind that didn't need to be loud. As a teenager, he slowly began developing an interest in sports. Not because he was chasing fame, but because he loved structure, teamwork, and challenge. The same values that had shaped him at home. Football, with its strategy and discipline, felt natural to him. But he wasn't a natural talent. He had to work harder than everyone else just to keep up. Coaches noticed something unusual. He was never the flashiest, but he was always the most dependable. He wasn't emotional, but he was always in control. He may not have talked much, but every teammate trusted him. Long before the world knew his name, Andy Russell developed the trait that would define his entire career: leadership without noise. People later said he didn't just play football. He thought football. He understood positioning, play timing, angles, blocking schemes, and how to read an offense better than players who were faster, stronger, or more gifted. And this wasn't taught by any coach. It came from his upbringing, a life built on discipline, patience, and character, long before his Steelers journey would begin. College football at Missouri, the making of a leader. Andy Russell enrolled at the University of Missouri, not as a football star, but as a disciplined student-athlete with a strong work ethic. He walked onto the football field with the same quiet determination he had since childhood. No hype, no spotlight, just focus. At Missouri, Andy faced stronger, faster athletes, many of whom were recruited stars. He didn't stand out physically, but coaches quickly noticed something more valuable. He was smart, reliable, and mentally tougher than most players on the field. He studied film, understood offensive tendencies, and always positioned himself correctly. That football IQ set him apart. He wasn't the flashiest linebacker, but he became the kind of player coaches trusted. He didn't make noise. He made things happen. As he matured, teammates naturally looked up to him. Without giving speeches or chasing attention, he became a leader simply by how he carried himself. By the time he finished his college career, Andy Russell had earned respect, not just for his performance, but for his character, discipline, and consistency. He wasn't famous yet, but he had something far more valuable. He had become a leader. That leadership, calm, smart, and disciplined, would soon catch the eye of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers draft and early struggles, 1963 to 1965. In 1963, the Pittsburgh Steelers drafted Andy Russell in the 16th round. Not a headline pick, not a future superstar, just a quiet, disciplined linebacker from Missouri with leadership qualities, the kind that didn't show up on stat sheets. At that time, the Steelers were not the Steelers we know today. No dynasty, no steel curtain, no Super Bowl dreams. They were a struggling franchise, bouncing between losing seasons, with no true identity. Andy Russell arrived in a locker room that lacked structure, leadership, and direction. It was nothing like the disciplined environment he was used to. Players were talented, but not united. The Steelers needed someone who could bring order, intelligence, and a culture of accountability. Andy didn't talk much. He observed, learned, and adapted. He earned a starting position early, surprising many. But just when his NFL journey was beginning, something unexpected happened, something almost unheard of in modern football. After only one season, Andy Russell left the NFL. Not because he was cut, not because he wasn't good enough, but because duty called. He voluntarily left football to join the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War era. In an age where players fought for roster spots, he walked away. Not for money, not for fame, but for service and responsibility. That decision would shape the man he would become, and ultimately, the leader the Steelers desperately needed. His football career was paused, but his story was just beginning. Military service, discipline, growth, and leadership. When Andy Russell left the Steelers to serve in the U.S. Army, it wasn't the end of his football career. It was the beginning of something bigger. Military life didn't change him, it sharpened him. He learned structure, precision, responsibility, and leadership at a level few athletes ever experience. He wasn't just training his body. He was developing mental toughness, resilience, and strong decision-making under pressure. While football players were preparing for a new season, Andy Russell was preparing men for real missions. That kind of responsibility shaped him into something that no regular training camp ever could, a true leader. By the time his military service ended, Andy wasn't just returning as a player. He was returning as a commander, a leader, and a disciplined professional with a completely different mindset. He was not the same young linebacker who had left. He was now stronger, smarter, more mature, and ready to lead. In 1966, Andy Russell made his return to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that's when his real NFL career truly began. Return to Pittsburgh. Leadership before the dynasty. When Andy Russell returned to the Steelers in 1966, he wasn't just another player coming back. He was a different man. He carried himself with quiet confidence, sharp discipline, and the kind of leadership that didn't require a speech to be respected. The Steelers were still not a great team yet. They were rebuilding, searching for identity, and had no true direction. But for the first time, they had something new. A leader who could build the foundation before the stars arrived. Russell became a full-time starter and immediately made an impact. He didn't try to be the face of the team. He simply set the standard, through preparation, through discipline, and through consistency. While others played with passion, Russell played with calculation. He studied film, read offenses, and understood the game like a coach on the field. And players noticed. Young teammates began to look up to him. Coaches trusted him. Even veterans respected how he approached the game. He wasn't loud, but he was influential. He wasn't the most famous, but he was the most trusted. He became the Steelers' defensive captain, not by self-promotion, but through natural leadership. Before Jack Lambert, before Jack Ham, before the steel curtain truly formed, Andy Russell was the one leading the way. He was laying the foundation for what would soon become the greatest defense in NFL history. The steel curtain begins, mentoring future legends. When people talk about the steel curtain, they mention names like Mean Joe Greene, Jack Lambert, Jack Ham, and Mel Blount. But here's what most people don't realize. Small blue diamond, when those legends arrived, Andy Russell was already there, leading them. He was the captain before they became stars. By the late 1960s, the Steelers had finally begun to draft elite defensive talent. In 1969 came Joe Greene, followed by Jack Ham in 1971, Franco Harris in 1972, Jack Lambert and Lynn Swann in 1974, and Mel Blount along the way. A dynasty was being built, but every dynasty needs a leader before the stars know how to lead themselves. And that leader was Andy Russell, the mentor nobody talked about. While Greene brought intensity, Lambert brought aggression, and Ham brought finesse. Andy Russell brought discipline, structure, and control. He was the film room general, the one who taught younger players how to study the game, not just play it. He showed them how to read an offense before the snap, how to recognize blocking schemes, where to position themselves, not just react but anticipate, and most importantly, how to conduct themselves like professionals. The defensive leader. Players later said, Andy Russell was like another coach on the field. He just understood the game. Jackham. He made us all better before we even knew how good we could become. Joe Greene. Even Chuck Noll trusted him as a locker room stabilizer, someone who could control emotions, guide rookies, and keep the defense mentally sharp. Russell didn't just play on the steel curtain. He helped build it. Why he wasn't as famous as the others? Andy Russell didn't have flashy moments like Lambert's hits or Mel Blount's shutdown coverage. He didn't showboat. He didn't seek headlines. And that is exactly why history forgot to mention him. Even though, without him, the steel curtain might never have become what it did. He was the first captain, the quiet architect, the man who shaped the locker room before the championships came. His influence shaped the Steelers before they became legends. Next, the world would finally see how that leadership turned into championships. Super Bowl glory and the prime of the steel curtain. By the early 1970s, the foundation had been built. The young stars matured. The system was in place. The culture was strong. And Andy Russell, now the established captain, led them into the NFL's biggest stage. Super Bowl IX, the first crown, 1975. January 12, 1975. Tulane Stadium, New Orleans. The Steelers' defense didn't just play football that day. They dominated football. They held the Minnesota Vikings to 0 offensive points. While Joe Greene stuffed the run and Lambert brought fire, Andy Russell controlled the middle, reading plays, directing traffic, and shutting down anything that came his way. This wasn't just a game. It was the birth of the Steelers dynasty. And in that moment, Andy Russell wasn't just a linebacker. He was the captain of a champion. Super Bowl X, the legacy grows, 1976. 1 year later, they returned, this time against the Dallas Cowboys. The world watched the flash, the big hits, the iconic swan catch. But behind it all, Andy Russell quietly kept the defense disciplined, structured, and ready. He wasn't always the star, but he was always the one holding the stars together. The unspoken legacy. By now, Russell had been selected to 7 Pro Bowls, earned 2 Super Bowl rings, mentored Hall of Famers Lambert, Ham, Blount, Greene, captained one of the greatest defenses ever. But here's the twist. When history told the story of the steel curtain, his name wasn't always mentioned. Not because he didn't matter, but because he never sought attention. And that is the story of Andy Russell's greatness. Not loud, not flashy, but foundational. Honors, respect, and the Hall of Fame snub. By the time Andy Russell retired from the NFL in 1976, his resume spoke for itself. 7 times Pro Bowler, more than many Hall of Famers. 2 times Super Bowl champion. Team captain for nearly a decade. The first defensive leader of the Steel Curtain. United States military veteran and Walter Payton Man of the Year finalist. Known as one of the smartest linebackers of his era. He didn't just play with legends. He helped shape them. He wasn't just part of the Steel Curtain. He helped build it. You would think that resume would guarantee Hall of Fame induction, right? But it didn't. Why was Andy Russell overlooked? There wasn't a lack of respect from teammates or coaches. In fact, players like Jack Lambert, and Joe Greene openly credited Russell for teaching them how to play the position. Coaches respected him. Teammates admired him. Opponents feared his intelligence and consistency. But he never marketed himself. He didn't give fiery interviews. He wasn't loud, flashy, or theatrical. He didn't play for attention. He played for the team. He was a leader in a world that celebrates stars. The Hall of Fame reality. Many linebackers with fewer accolades and less impact eventually made the Hall of Fame. But Andy Russell's quiet greatness often left him outside the spotlight. And because history remembers the biggest personalities more than the most important leaders, Andy Russell's name slowly faded from NFL public memory, but not from those who truly knew football. What legend said about him? Andy was our first real leader. Before the Dynasty, there was Andy Russell, Joe Greene. He was like another coach on the field. He taught us how to play. Jack Ham. When people talk about the Steel Curtain, they should start with him. Jack Lambert. He might not be in the Hall of Fame yet, but his legacy lives inside every championship the Steelers ever won. Because before the Stars, before the Dynasty, before the legend of Pittsburgh football, there was Andy Russell. Before the banners were raised, before Mean Joe became an icon, before Lambert, Blount, Ham, and Bradshaw became legends, there was a man who led quietly, taught patiently, and stood proudly in black and gold. Andy Russell didn't just wear the Steelers' uniform. He defined what it meant. He was the first true captain of the modern Steelers. He laid the foundation. He built the culture. He guided a struggling franchise into a dynasty. No dance moves. No media spotlight. No loud personality. Just respect, discipline, leadership. The kind of greatness that doesn't need fame to be remembered. Only honesty. And even if the Hall of Fame still hasn't recognized him, every player he led, every game he influenced, every championship he helped build is a part of his legacy. Because greatness is not always loud. Sometimes, greatness is a quiet captain who led before anyone else believed. If you believe Andy Russell's story deserves to be remembered, help us keep his legacy alive. Like this video, share your thoughts in the comments. Should Andy Russell be in the Hall of Fame? Subscribe to Black and Gold Legacy for more untold stories of Steelers history. This isn't just football history. This is Steelers legacy.